It is not easy to categorically dismiss it either, although the story of magical Ethiopia does contain components rooted in mythology and even fantasy. It has woven and appropriated awesome and magical tales of origins, nobility, royalty, divinity, and destiny rooted in scripture, fantasy, and mythology. He says that his father has not seen peace, and he has not seen peace, and his children will not see peace. I think his lamentations could be extended to his grandfather and grandfather. Ethiopia has never seen peace for a long time. Now we are hearing loud and louder cries from other nations and communities in Ethiopia, particularly from the Amhara people. And if you see the news emanating from that region and from Oromia to some extent, they are clear in saying that they're facing genocide. Ethiopian state has also never accepted the reality, aspirations, and rights of its neighbors, particularly the Somalis, as nation and state both. Ethiopia's interest in Somalia is not only economic and commercial, but maybe a matter of survival and beyond. So is Somalia's interest in Ethiopia. I want to thank East African Institute, particularly the chief and his staff for the hard work that they have shown. It was really quite a miracle that we are here. I know the struggle that they have gone through, and it's quite a miracle that we are here today. My topic is the Ethiopian state, a rogue leviathan with a savage streak. Why peace and sustainable development still elude the Ethiopian state. Ethiopia often conjures up the image of a special dominion favored by God, geography, nature, history, and civilization. If you listen to Abiy Ahmed, you find this in his remarks and in his talks. Not everyone is necessarily convinced of the veracity of this assertion or willing to accept it at face value. It is not easy to categorically dismiss it either, although the story of magical Ethiopia does contain components rooted in mythology and even fantasy. It has woven and appropriated awesome and magical tales of origins, nobility, royalty, divinity, and destiny rooted in scripture, fantasy, and mythology. Nature has provided land endowed with plenty of resources, fertile soil, mighty rivers, combined with a strategic location. Its affinity with the Nile and proximity to Middle East have offered rare and invaluable opportunities to interact with the abodes of origin, earlier human civilizations, and birthplace of Abrahamic religions. By any objective standards, this dazzling assemblage of assets and opportunities could and should have made Ethiopia a place better than what it is today, and with a future brighter and far more promising than the prospects that lie ahead. At the very minimum, Ethiopia ought to have been firmly on the path to a slow but steady progress. However, that is not to be. This is obvious and painfully self-evident In fact, the problem with Ethiopia is not only slow progress or even no progress. There are credible signs of regression and degeneration. Ethiopia has existed in a universe of its own, one foundationally built on a bundle of contradictions, at once perfect and profoundly flawed, civilized. I'm talking about the Ethiopian state, not the people who inhabit in their dominion. Built on a bundle of contradictions, at once perfect and profoundly flawed, civilized and irredeemably savage, powerful and weak, saintly and satanic. Satanic is a word recently used by the Ethiopian clergy to describe the nature of the leader in power at the present time. Prosperous and abjectly poor, bound for greatness and eternal glory, and frequently prone to lethal episodes of focus on the peace that he talks about peace. He says that his father has not seen peace, and he has not seen peace, and his children would not see peace. I think his lamentations could be extended to his grandfather and grandfather. Ethiopia has never seen peace for a long time. Why? There are reasons, explanations abound as to why peace and sustainable development is still elude Ethiopia. Myriad and complex reasons. I would like to single out the following. A rogue state with a savage streak. The nature of the state system in Ethiopia is the primary cause of this. To be fair to Ethiopia, the emergence of the modern state is not one that is known for kindness. Everywhere in the world, states have been very repressive, and they have known for lethal politics. And as of today, the number of people killed and maimed by states far outnumber the number killed by any other affliction. But to their great credit, the Abyssinians have evolved an ancient and original state. But unfortunately, over the centuries, the growth of that state has been stunted, and it has not developed internally and resisted new ideas and innovations from the outside world. It has become steeped in lethal politics, militarization, repression, predation, war, terror, mass slaughter, and genocide has always loomed large in Ethiopia. A state rooted in hegemonic designs and deeply authoritarian approach to resolving political differences and disagreements by brute force and beholden to a zero-sum game where the winner takes all. 3 recent genocide scenarios in the last, I think from 2007, we have observed multiple war crimes in Ethiopia. The language that the international community and human rights organizations use these atrocities very greatly, but in my personal opinion, all of them had notions of genocide in them. The first was the one that has taken in the Ogaden during the conflict with the ONLF. Evidence is quite plentiful in the literature of human rights organizations, the government led by TPLF and EPRDF has committed atrocity crimes of the most heinous type in that region to get rid of the ONLF. Entire towns and regions were closed, and people were subjected to unimaginable tale of terror. And most recently, we have seen what happened in Tigray. I have never been a fan of the TPLF when they were in power, but what we have seen in Tigray is unacceptable in this day and age. People have been killed in numbers that we have never seen in Africa for the past 100 years. This state has a way of killing people in the dark and somehow being able to hide it from the world. 1 million or so dead or wounded is a number that neither Ethiopia or any other country can afford. Now we are hearing loud and louder cries from other nations and communities in Ethiopia, particularly from the Amhara people. And if you see the news emanating from that region and from Oromia to some extent, they are clear in saying that they're facing genocide. The world might turn a blind eye on this, but the fact is that there is an element of truth in this. What we see in Ethiopia across is that genocide has always, and war crimes has always loomed large in that country. And because of the nature of the state, the Ethiopian state. If you see the history of Ethiopia, even the leaders of Ethiopia has not escaped from that affliction. From the early 19th century, almost every leader has been a victim of that terrible state. The most famous incident in that of Haile Selassie, where he left power and the world in the loneliest and most cruel way imaginable. The most lethal configuration of the state is underway right now, in my opinion. We have seen a leader that is like no any other leader in Ethiopia. He is young, inexperienced, but somehow very conversant with the Ethiopian state and how it has worked previously. In many ways, maybe many people will not be happy with the term that I use, but there is what I call the Nazification of the Ethiopian state. A new fascist order is emerging in Ethiopia. It has a leader. It has a book called Medammar, which in many ways, really, in my view, similar to the books of the fascists of earlier years. And it has an ideology. Many people have different names, but it's clear that it's an ideology of hate and xenophobia. The fact that this state is now presided over by a Nobel Peace Laureate speaks volumes about the nature of this state and the nature of its leadership and political class. The second point is what I call geopolitical illiteracy. Ethiopia has never accepted the limitations of its geography. I mean, the Ethiopian state has never accepted the limitations of its geography. Geography imposes certain limitations and restrictions on any people, any state. And if those people and state do not accept that reality, then there are consequences. Ethiopian state has also never accepted the reality, aspirations, and rights of its neighbors, particularly the Somalis, as nation and state both. The ecology of the region and geography of the region, economy of the region call for cooperation. But that has not happened primarily because of the nature of that state. There is a man called Mesfin Woldemariam, late Mesfin Woldemariam, one of the Ethiopianists, very, very aggressive nationalist, even jingoistic. But he has himself noticed the nature of the Horn of Africa and its cry for cooperation, but somehow that cry has not been heeded. He says, quote unquote, geographically Ethiopia and Somalia complement each other. Each is poorer without the other, just as each is richer with the other. Ethiopia's interest in Somalia is not only economic and commercial, but maybe a matter of survival and beyond. So is Somalia's interest in Ethiopia. His conclusions were even more pertinent. Ethiopia and Somalia are more than just neighbors. They must understand this geographical fact. Ethiopians and Somalis must become either close friends or cutthroat enemies. Unfortunately, they have become the latter, primarily coming from Ethiopia in my personal view. How could this resolve? This is a question that is very difficult to answer, and it's for everyone to work on it. In my view, I make two recommendations, one for Ethiopia and Ethiopians. By the way, I want to mention one thing about Abiy. Prior 4 months prior to his receiving the Nobel Peace Laureate, he wrote a letter to the French president asking for 4 billion worth of arms. Those arms included ballistic missiles capable of carrying nuclear weapons. This is widely available in the French media, and you can have a look at it. Why would a poor country like Ethiopia need ballistic missiles that are capable of carrying nuclear weapons? My recommendations is for it. For Ethiopians, reinvent the architecture and mission of the Ethiopian state, or perish. There is no mission greater than this, and its fulfillment is long overdue. In fact, it has been decades overdue. For the region and the international community, the business as usual is not an option anymore. Reform and radically transform the state and governance structures and resource management and distribution within the countries, or face the imminent collapse or even demise of the rigid state systems and the economies of predation and poverty. Thank you very much.